My name is Roger Diamond. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm in trial right now, Department 102, and I never eat lunch when I'm in trial, but every lunch hour I come over to the law library across the street from the criminal court building and do research. In fact, today, in reading the advance sheets, I came across a case that's very relevant to my trial. So I want to thank everybody and thank the law library for being such a great resource and a great research tool. Thank you very much, law library.
Good evening. I'm Susan Steinhauser, President of the Board of Trustees of the Los Angeles County Law Library. And on behalf of our trustee and our friends of the library, I welcome you. As you all know, we are gathered to celebrate Justice Arthur Gilbert, and a round of applause is certainly due. Before saying anything more, I want to recognize Attorney General Jerry Brown, our keynote speaker. Thank you. And past Beacon of Justice recipients, the Honorable Shirley Huffstedler, the Honorable Norman Epstein, and Seth Huffstedler. In addition, I want to recognize the very many people who have made tonight's event possible. Our major donors, our honorary co-hosts, our honorary co-chairs, our Friends Board, headed up by our hard-working, top-quality, and remarkable President Bob Adler. Please step forward, Bob. Our generous and devoted Board of Trustees, and especially our staff, who have redesigned our display case to tell the Arthur Gilbert story. I hope you all saw it on the entry and that you'll take it in again as you leave. Who have also transformed our reading rooms into a center of celebration. But most importantly, without our staff, talented and professional, we couldn't provide the quality and scope of services we do, and a round of applause is in order for them. I also want to recognize our former California Attorney General John Vandekamp, Matt Debenau, who is representing Congressman Brad Sherman, Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky, City Controller Laura Chick, and I anticipate that we will have with us Council Member Bernard Parks and Dennis Zine. I thank them all for making this a place of celebration. To paraphrase Bob Adler, our noble leader, the Los Angeles County Law Library, with all of this accumulated learning on display, is such a very important part of our, quote, secular religion, unquote. Entering these reading rooms with law books lining the walls, embracing you, in one glance, you know three things. The law is smart, justice is careful, and it's also blind. For some, this library is a repository and access point for judicial precedent and scholarship, and for others, it's a haven and a place of repose from the battles of the courtroom. But tonight, it takes on a very different role. After we held our first gala, celebrating the 50th birthday of this building and named it in honor of Justice Mildred Lilly, we created the Beacon of Justice Award. We have welcomed nominations from so many of you, our stakeholders, meticulously reviewed your submissions, and then selected our honorees. Tonight is our 5th anniversary, can you imagine? And lawyers, librarians, judges, justices, public officials, and others have come together in this library to confer a special honor on one of our own. Tonight, it is a venue for reunion and for camaraderie. It is one of the only times you can eat, you can drink, you can make merry, and talk whenever you want, except when Arthur Gilbert will be talking, as well as our other speakers. Moreover, as a public agency, and we are more than 100 years old, I think we look pretty good for 107, with no agenda but to provide access to legal information to all who seek it, this event, this library, takes on special significance and earns a special place of affection in the heart of the LA legal community. To all of you who have joined with us, and especially for our 5-year donors, our deep and abiding thanks for believing as we do that the law library is essential to our system of justice and that it is a timeless and vital civic institution that deserves your financial support. With your generosity, we have expanded access, upgraded technology, and provided additional services and materials for self-represented litigants who continue to make up such a growing part of our user base. And now, turning to the reason why we're really here. It's Justice Arthur Gilbert. I'm going to say very little because all of these people know him so much better. But I think we would all agree he is witty, incisive, energetic, and yes, humorous. He was the MC at our first Friends event in 2003, and he too holds a special place in our hearts. We honor him especially not only for what he has done on the bench, but what he has done as an educator of judges and as a commentator on contemporary jurisprudence. A superb raconteur. We do officially end at 8, but who knows how long we'll be here. I can only imagine what stories he will share tonight. As part of tonight's celebration, Justice Gilbert and the Rudder Group have collaborated on the compilation and publication of his Gilbert Submits columns into a one not so skinny volume. Would someone hold it up so everyone can see what it looks like? Yes. It is called Under Submission. And he and the Rudder Group have most unselfishly donated them to the library to raise additional funds for our operations and programs. As you may have noticed, he has signed them all. His hand is still affixed to his wrist. And he is willing to autograph them for anyone who wants. We encourage you to take one as a souvenir of tonight's celebration, and we hope you'll consider making an additional contribution and return it in the envelope that was on the table as you leave or even in the next few days. And although I know your hearts all beat fast for Justice Gilbert, I'm obligated to turn you over to Marcia Kozlow for just a few brief minutes. She is our dynamic executive director responsible for our many library innovations, not the least of which is our going Wi-Fi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Susan. In 2007, our Board of Trustees adopted a new vision. The LA Law Library is the leader in providing public access to legal information. Our focus has been to identify how best to provide that access through our staff, our collection, and our services. This year, we've hired amazing talent, a law librarian focused on the public needs and those of the self-represented. And since we've one of the premier foreign and international law collections, we hired a law librarian who specializes in foreign and international law. New staff in our technology services area have created and reshaped our new website. Since it went live at the end of November, nearly 30,000 people have visited our site, and we've been hit over 250,000 times in that time, about 1,800 hits a day. The majority of our visitors are, of course, from the US, but 15% come from foreign countries, 45 represented. Several behind-the-scenes projects are also designed to make us more accessible online. For instance, we've begun a project to add nearly 90,000 titles to our online catalog. And Wi-Fi, as Susan mentioned, was established here at the main library last year and will be going to our branch libraries. LA Law Library has approximately 1 million equivalent volumes. Beyond this floor, the library holds about 30 miles of shelving. That includes 5 miles of briefs of the California Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, the most complete collection in the state. To help make that information available, we are just about to launch a process that will scan and digitize those briefs and make them accessible on our website. We continue to focus on outreach. Let's be honest, except for fabulous occasions such as this, it's hard for a lot of you to come downtown. Never mind that we have a fantastic new training center, conference rooms, and newly furnished touchdown spaces if you happen to be in trial for several days and need an office away from home. So what's a library to do? Well, if you won't come to us, we'll come to you. Our partnership with the Pasadena Public Library is working quite well, and we're using it as a model to work with other public libraries to provide online and print access to legal information in non-law library settings. We plan to enhance our branch locations, and we continue our plans to be accessible at your desktop. As I said last year, our goal is to move the perception of a law library from a building full of books to an environment for continuous learning, community engagement, and sharing knowledge. The LA Law Library is proud to recognize Justice Arthur Gilbert for a lifetime of continuous education and knowledge sharing, and for his deep commitment to sustaining the high quality of justice in this state. On behalf of the Law Library staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes, and to whom I say thank you, and that's not sufficient, it's our privilege and our honor to host this wonderful event that recognizes Justice Gilbert with the Beacon of Justice Award.
Your time is up.
He says that during our oral argument with great regularity. My name's Steve Perrin. I'm a colleague of Arthur's. I want to thank Susan and the trustees and Marcia for this really extraordinary event for a very extraordinary fellow. I actually referred to you as a fellow. I'd like to offer a few thoughts about not a fellow, but my dear friend and colleague. I was to have recited quotes from and encomiums about his work and of him. I know that I was to have done so because Thursday last, Arthur called me into his chambers to provide me with the necessary information with which to do it. His favorite passages from his cases, his articles, and what others have said of him. For example, in describing the book that you hold in your hands, Professor Herb Morris commented, and I quote, "Mozartian brio and wit combined with a wonderfully Swiftian skewering of the many follies perpetrated upon the legal landscape," end quote. That kind of ripped you up, didn't it? But after giving me his directives and the requisite quotes, Arthur stressed that my comments must be spontaneous. As I conceived, I would have had little difficulty in writing my comments since he had already done so for me. But these are my words, not his, because he would never speak of himself as those of us who know and love him will. He is a brilliant writer, a scholar, a teacher, and an artist. His words speak for themselves. They are lucid and they are witty. He will deflate legal balloons, but he will not injure the passengers. For example, he chided the legislature of California, and I quote, "Amending a statute is like adding a room to an existing house. A successful architect must ensure that the addition be integrated into the whole. In amending this statute, the legislature has drafted plans that call for a shower in the living room." But the words are, of course, to a purpose. In a case in which a prisoner saved the life of a prison guard, the warden in the trial court denied him added conduct credits for his heroism because he was a three-striker and was thus ineligible for the benefit of additional reduction in time in custody. All who had heard the case had concluded that the heroic act credits, which were conduct credits because both sections awarding heroic act credits and conduct credits were in the credits section of the penal code, and therefore he could not receive them because the law prohibited it. In dissent, Arthur urged, "Fish and whales swim in the same ocean, only one is a mammal." The Supreme Court agreed. But beyond the words, consider the sweetness of this man. As you know, it strikes me, I know, and I assumed all of you know, but it may well be that you don't. He is a brilliant jazz pianist. Arthur regularly visited with the great clarinetist Artie Shaw as Shaw's life edged toward its end. That's the goodness of him. They were friends. The nonagenarian Alice McGrath of Sleepy Lagoon fame is often escorted to lunch by Arthur up in Ventura as she reflects on her radical days of the 40s and 50s. Arthur sits and listens because he truly cares. I teach at Judges College with Arthur, or actually, he does the teaching. I put a dab here or there on his canvas. The course is The Art of Judging. That's his title, which is also the title of one of his writings. A goodly portion of the discussion in that class integrates Shakespeare's Measure for Measure with a discussion of the right of a murderer to inherit from the grandfather he killed. Now, I suspect that nearly all of the state's 1,600 trial judges and appellate justices have benefited from his insights and realized that judging is more than a paint-by-numbers discipline. He is, simply put, a marvelous teacher. And I say that from personal experience. I tried cases for 17 years, and I came to the Court of Appeal as a novice. When I first came to Division 6, I sought his counsel, his guidance. Ask, he said to me, and I commend this to all of you who practice in the appellate courts. Ask, what is this case really about? It seems so self-evident to hear such a comment, that is often lost in the briefs that we see. Then, having done so, he said to me, write the facts. The rest will necessarily follow. Last week, when he was prepping me for what I should and should not say, he cautioned me to be wary of commenting on his enthusiasm. He, I think, felt it somewhat damning with faint praise. He described it as saying, you have a date tonight with a lady and she's a wonderful cook. I never disregard what he says and am often deferential to his requests, but here I was stumped. For I consider his zeal for justice, his attention to detail, and his love of the law infectious and elevating. His passion for the law as an instrument for justice is boundless. It is easy to speak of doing the right thing. The art of judging, the art that he has mastered, lies in actually doing it. Some time ago, Arthur and I were discussing music. He spoke of his passion for jazz. Now, I have often seen him perform, a treat by any measure. I told him that while I liked listening to jazz, I didn't understand it. Or to put it simply, I didn't get it. He looked at me and he smiled and said, it's about the spaces. I didn't quite understand it then. But then I realized those 4 words said it all. With Arthur, it is about the spaces. Now, he has the same 88 keys afforded every pianist, the same 26 letters availed every writer. But he also understands the rhythm and the silence. As a result, when he writes and when he plays, it simply comes out better. I'm privileged beyond measure to be a part of these proceedings that serve so rightly to honor my friend, my colleague, and a true beacon of justice, for he is truly a light that illuminates the path we follow.
Yeah.
I'm also privileged to be nominally the master of ceremonies, to the extent there is such, and it is my privilege to introduce Elwood Louis. Now, Elwood is the brother that Arthur never had, and there's a remarkable family resemblance between the two that I think you'll note when he speaks. Elwood's record in the law is, to say the least, remarkable. Presently, he's a partner at Jones Day, where he's been practicing for 20 years. Before that, he had served a full career as a trial judge and as an appellate justice in the 2nd District. His civic activities range from acting director of the LA County Department of Children and Family Services, member of the Board of Harbor Commissioners for the Port of Los Angeles, service upon the Judicial Council of California, president of the California Judges Association, president of the UCLA Law Alumni Association, which has also honored him as its Alumnus of the Year in 2001, as well as the university's Professional Achievement Award that he received in 1992. He has received the Whitkin Medal from the State Bar and the Whitkin Amicus Curiae Award from the Judicial Council. He is regularly ranked amongst the top 100 of California lawyers. Through Arthur, it has been my extreme good fortune to meet and to know Elwood. Given the recital of his achievements, and it is heavily redacted, one would expect a rather distant fellow. Not so. He is intellect with grace and public service with a smile. And since he does not abide such plaudits easily, I'll just simply stop and introduce my friend and Arthur's brother, Elwood Louis.
Good evening. It's indeed my pleasure to speak of my good friend, an incredibly gifted appellate justice, an accomplished musical artist, and a very loyal Bruin alumnus who is painting over the next Final Four. But enough about Steve Perrin. This is Arthur Gilbert's night. Arthur, take solace in the fact that I had these words approved by our Rabbi Louis Barch. I first met Arthur in 1975, just a few days after then Governor Brown, now General Brown. I love to say General Brown. Appointed us both to the now non-existent Los Angeles Episcopal Court. Of course, I was appointed before you, Arthur, which has pained you forever. You've always accused me of racing to the courthouse to be sworn in ahead of you because I've had seniority ever since. But General Brown knows who was appointed first. Don't tell anybody. We first spoke by telephone a few hours after our appointments were announced. I did not know him before then, but it seems to me that I have known him my entire life. We're dear friends, and he shared many happy and pleasant family events, including officiating my son Chris's wedding. Chris is here tonight to honor you as well. We decided to have lunch at the Furniture Mart, and then to meet our new colleagues, Norm Epstein and Francis Rothbard, at the Traffic Court building. They were appointed several months before us, and we believed them to be true veterans of the judiciary. We found them both in Justice Epstein's chambers, poring over the California appellate reports. It seems that they had formed their own special book club. They were reading Calap's second cover to cover. There are many books that you can enjoy about Calap's second, third and fourth. We both left that meeting rather sick and puzzled. Was this a mistake? We were just appointed to the municipal court and assigned to the traffic court, and we both thought that what we were going to determine were cases where someone was speeding in excess of the speed limit or making an illegal left turn, and why we needed Calap second to solve these novel legal issues present in that court. Well, as things would later unfold in our career, not only were Gilbert and I reading Calap second and third, we were writing it. Thanks again to Governor General Brown. Art spent his first judicial years in traffic court and was the presiding judge of that court. In fact, he became known as the king of the traffic court. It was praised for his leadership in simplifying procedures and making that court more user-friendly. One of his best decisions was to order that the court documents be translated into Spanish and other languages so that people could understand what was going on in their own cases. He refused other assignments because he enjoyed being the king of the traffic court. Eventually, he was elevated to the Superior Court. While he missed his throne as the king of the traffic court, he brought the same enthusiasm and love for his judicial duties to the juvenile court. In 1982, he was elevated to the Court of Appeal as part of a statewide expansion of that court. Eventually, he became presiding judge in Division 6 a few years later. For the first year, Division 6 had absolutely no home. Its members were left to their own devices to find space at the court's headquarters, which was then on Wilshire Boulevard. I really felt sorry for Art. He would be found wandering the hallways, looking lost and homeless. So I invited him to share my own chambers in Division 3. I got to observe him writing his first opinion, and which, incidentally, I edited for him. And he painfully admitted that he liked some of my edits, even though English was the second language for me. It continues to be so. But I saw him agonize over the decision because he really does want to do the right thing, and he will painfully go through that process. His friends and colleagues from the trial court were wondering how he was doing. They asked how the appellate court was. And he would be frank and say, well, perhaps the more correct term would be whining, that you come to the appellate court, you lose your own courtroom, and you don't get chambers. You get a roommate, who happened to be me. And then he would tell them that I made too much noise, was very messy, and took far too much of the space that we had in my chambers. We really did have fun together, and about a year later, the Ventura Courthouse for Division 6 was completed, and Arthur began a 25-year daily trek to Ventura from his home in Palisades. Arthur does have a well-deserved reputation, as you've heard, as a legal scholar and writer. His opinions are the model of clarity and simplicity. While his opinions are brief, the end product is always exquisitely precise and well-reasoned. His opinions are often laced with humor to make a point. He's widely regarded as one of the finest appellate justices in the history of the state. I believe that the quality of his opinions is grounded in his love and passion that he has for his work. He reviews the facts of each case carefully and with precision. He researches the law thoroughly and only reaches a decision after a thoughtful analysis of the law, without a predetermined result in mind. He will then often try to write the decision with the opposite result, and then debate it with himself before coming to his final decision. Yes, it is true that he had often in the past talked to and consulted with his beloved cat, Oj, seeking to tame Oj's concurrence, which was not often given. The love and enthusiasm he had for the law had made him the kind of special jurist that we admire. As you've heard, he's also devoted his time teaching others, lawyers and judges, and his column under submission has received national acclaim. A number of his columns are collected in the book that you've heard, and the proceeds that Arthur has donated to the public is another example of his caring for others. But there's one particular column that I like to mention. Arthur was writing about the use or misuse of the English language, yet again, and drew an analogy to a statement made by a former Lakers superstar, Shaquille O'Neal. During the legendary rivalry that was occurring then between the Lakers and the Sacramento Kings basketball teams, Shaq had said that the only way the Kings, whom Shaq frequently referred as the Sacramento Queens, could beat the Lakers was to, and then he said, a word that started with C and ended with T. Of course, basketball fans everywhere speculated what that word or words could mean. Art engaged in this speculation in this column as well. Shaq could, for example, have meant cheat, which starts with a C and ends with a T, or perhaps chicken sweat. I'm not going to say that other word, believe me. I caution Art not to write negatively about Shaq. Athletes do not like to be criticized in the press. He said, and indeed, he did, nevertheless, and told me it doesn't matter what Shaq thinks because Shaq doesn't read the Daily Journal. But if he did, he would probably dribble me up and down the Staples Center and dunk me in the basket. He didn't think for a minute that the big diesel would ever see the column. Well, he did. You see, Shaq was, and always wants to be, a lawman, and was a reserve L.A. Harbor police officer. And I happened to be on the Harbor Commission. So guess what? Shaq and I had a conversation. And I suggested to Shaq, who I called Police Officer O'Neill, that he may want to reply to Arthur's comments in reference to his column. Shaq read the column and took a copy of it and wrote on it, "Hey Gilbert, J, what makes you think I don't read your column?" Signs his name and his number. And then he has it framed for delivery to Arthur. His colleagues presented it to Arthur during one of their calendar conferences. And Arthur was speechless. The first time I heard that he was ever speechless in his life, that Shaquille O'Neal would file a responsive brief to his column. Well, enough from me. It is a well-deserved award, the Beacon of Justice Award, to a universally respected judge. And the judge was regarded as the poet laureate of the California judiciary. For these 33 years, Arthur, you have served the people of the state. On behalf of them, I thank you. But remember, you're a beacon, not a deacon. Thank you.
That's the truth will out. It is you that we blame for that article with Shaq. Arthur walked around with that thing taped to his chest for 3 days.
I'll get you later.
No, you won't. I'm not giving up the mic. It is my privilege to introduce Helen Zukin. In 1999, Arthur was up for consideration for the position of Presiding Justice of Division 6 of the 2nd Appellate District, the position that he presently holds. As many of you know, the process is one which, as we all know, requires a pretty exhaustive appraisal of the applicant by the Commission on Judicial Nominees Evaluation, affectionately referred to as Jenny. Helen was the chair of the commission at the time. I recall her speaking of him in very glowing terms. I recall it because I was next up for consideration, and that was a too tough an act to follow. You simply couldn't. One had to simply be content to bask in the reflected glory of the words she spoke of Arthur that day. And speaking of that, Helen's credentials are also quite imposing. Not content to simply be an active and successful litigator with Kiesel, Butcher, Larson, she is also dedicated to the public good. She serves currently as Vice President of the Los Angeles Ethics Commission and served on Jenny for about a decade. A frequent speaker at seminars sponsored by a variety of professional and legal organizations, she specializes in environmental property damage and toxic tort cases, topics upon which she has also frequently written. She has served actively on the Board of Governors of Consumer Attorneys of Los Angeles and is the recipient of its President's Award for Achievement in 1991 and again in 1999. It's my privilege to introduce to you Helen Zukin.
Well, you're going to get a reprise tonight, Steve, of that Jenny Commission evaluation. I've been asked to give some highlights of Arthur Gilbert's Jenny Commission evaluation for presiding justice. Little did I know when I took on my 100th and final assignment as chair of the Jenny Commission that I was going to be evaluating someone who was a jazz musician whose day job included teaching Shakespeare. The work of a Jenny Commissioner is long. It can be tedious. It can involve difficult candidates and awkward situations. But once in a while, someone comes through who is so remarkable that it makes the work worthwhile. Arthur Gilbert was that candidate. Rarely does a person trigger so strong a response from the legal community. The return rate on Arthur's evaluations were astounding. Normally, I used a 3-inch black binder that I would just recycle over and over again. But for Arthur's evaluation, I had to go to Staples and get a 10-inch binder. This is because there were so many returns, and on them were attached letters, long testimonials to Arthur's achievements. Not often does a Jenny Commissioner receive unsolicited phone calls about a candidate. But in Arthur's case, our office receptionist was kept extremely busy for weeks. And out of over 350 returns, there were no negative comments. Not one disgruntled litigant, not one sore loser. For someone that had been on the bench 25 years, that was highly unprecedented. Also unprecedented was the fact that every single evaluation was rated EWQ, exceptionally well qualified. That's the Jenny Commission's highest rating. Now, I've been training new Jenny Commissioners for 9 years, and I always teach them, be aware of an orchestrated campaign. Well, I began to wonder. I hadn't met Arthur yet, but then came his interview. Arthur arrived. He interviewed us. He went on to discuss his philosophy of judging, and then he told us jokes. We were convinced. He received a unanimous, exceptionally well-qualified rating from the full commission. And at his confirmation hearing, Love Fest, I recounted some of the sentiments of his colleagues. I'm going to give you just a few. The ones that were really reoccurring. That he is a role model for judges. His ability to teach the essence of judging is unparalleled. As a judicial writer, he has no rival. That his presence on the bench elevates the California judiciary. And as to elevation, many stated that he belonged on the Supreme Court, though the decision was split as to which one. Now, it's a serious breach of the Jenny rules. It can get you kicked off Jenny if you ever reveal the identity of those who fill out the evaluation forms. But I think I can make an exception. Arthur, many of your Jenny evaluators are in this room tonight. Thank you.
It was, I believe, Friday, December 28, 1982, at approximately 2:17 in the afternoon, that I first spoke with Governor Brown. His words continue to resonate. Steve, is it okay if we just send you right to the Superior Court? I didn't quibble. It was then followed by the request that I keep the faith and remember the people that I will be serving. That's about 26 years ago, Governor, and I will never forget those words. I heard him speak in an informal setting following his election as Attorney General. It was as if time had never passed. His candor, his appreciation for the needs of the state, and the reality of our times were all there. In a time when political vision often seems blurred, he is a visionary with a clear view of the horizon. I ran his biography on the Attorney General's website. It is a very interesting read. The scope and the diversity of his interests, his background, are simply breathtaking. I am not going to recount all of his achievements because I suspect those of you here well know of them. I say with all humility simply this, that it is my privilege to introduce the Attorney General of California, the Honorable Jerry Brown.
Thank you, and I don't go to libraries that often. As a matter of fact, we have a library in the Oakland State Building for the Office of the Attorney General. And since Bill occupied a little cubbyhole on the floor above, I've decided to take over half the library as my expanded office, which entails taking out the books, at least half the books. I felt bad about that, but then people told me, well, they don't read these books anymore, and it's all online. I don't know about that because I am still reading books, and I've thought quite a little about that, because I felt a little guilty in moving into the library and creating a little space there for my expanded group. But I'm doing, I have to do it not quite the way it's always been done. I've made as my chief and special counsel my wife, which violates every rule. But what I found out is that people like her better than me, and no one has complained. In fact, they're damn glad she's there to keep order in the place. So it's a new breakthrough. The only thing, by the way, I once ran into Wolfowitz in an elevator in Washington. I said, Wolfowitz, you know, you could have had that lady friend of yours. All you have to do is not pay her, because that doesn't violate the nepotism rules. He gave me a very sour look. Maybe he needed the money, or she needed the money, whatever. So the book, I have to say, before I say something about Arthur, I have to say something about the book. Because there's a few interconnecting lines here. The book is really at the heart of Western civilization. I have to take it up to a little larger level here. And the book is associated with the university. And the two have really gone together in the whole formation of Europe and the derivative which we are here in the United States. And of course, most of us derive our origins, our lineage, from religions of the book. And while the replacement of the book as the symbol of our society, our civilization, by the screen is certainly proceeding apace, it's going to make some changes. And while obviously I like the internet, in fact, well, anyway, it's a whole story. I started with an 800 number and I went to the internet. It's quite powerful. And I very much like going to use the electronic media to get information. But there's something about a book that's different. It's there, it's solid, you can't change it. Like, you know, in the Windows, you can just put anything you want. It's all, your options are limited. It's all plastic. It's all kind of at your command. Whereas a book, it's sweated over, you write it, and it can be kept for hundreds of years, and it really embodies our customs and our traditions. And while I've been a person who likes to shake tradition, as I get older, I begin to appreciate tradition a little more. It's just like when I started, I didn't want to hire anyone with experience because I didn't have any, and I didn't want to create any conflicts. But now I've kind of changed my tune now. I'm not trying to reform everybody or throw all the old people out. My mantra is there's no substitute for experience. And I have to throw a little tradition into that. And it's this this interaction between the change and continuity, which I see in the craft of judging. Now, I don't know a lot about judging. I'm on the other branch. I'm in the political branch. And we're not about tradition. We're about fundraising, sound bites, deals, masquerading as high principle. We have a rather dark side here. But somebody has to do it. We can't all be dispassionate judges. And it is important work, and it balances. But as we go about our work, our various work, we do need the balance of the other branch to impose, to create the constraints of tradition, of rules, all these books that we're seeing here. And in that work, that art, and it's not just the science. People talk about the science of the law, there's a science there, but it is an art. And an art is something that's intuitive, it's learned, it's practiced, and some people have it more than others, and even those who have it can get better at it. And I think if we look to Trainer or to Holmes or Learned Hand, this is one profession that the prize goes to the elderly, actually, the older people. You know, art, I think art is older than me, I'm not sure. Not by much, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But, so this is actually one of the few things left where experience and respect for the past plays a very powerful role, along with opening to the new, the innovation, the new rule that has to be propounded, but always within the context of the old. When it comes to the legislature, there's no constraint on what was. It's whatever you can put together with the requisite number of votes. So there is no tradition. There's just opportunity. And that's a very dynamic element of our society. But if it isn't constrained by the judiciary that can come in and impose some different kinds of perspectives, then we do get a rather unholy sight here at what we're facing. And when I think of our own state here, if I look at the prison system, if I look at the national, what's going on there with the executive branch, we need the judicial branch. And now that I'm Attorney General, I have 1,100 lawyers, and I'm suing everybody I can find. In fact, if you know any potential defendants, please let me know. Because we want to sue, we are supposed to sue, and we do so without apology or without embarrassment. Even though I'm trying to do it more efficiently and more elegantly, but it is important. And I now kind of get that sense now that I'm an advocate. So now we get to Arthur in this context of tradition. Now, why did he get to be a judge? Well, the predicate for his appointment was that he was a resident of the International House with Rose Byrne and myself. Absent those two facts, he might never have met it. In fact, I made it. I think Rose Byrne introduced me to you, or you, I can't remember, but the International House is a pretty interesting institution. It was formed by the Rockefellers, and it was to bring people of all backgrounds together in one residential facility. In this instance, the University of California. There are others around the world, but this one was very interesting. And I came to the International House where I met Arthur, I can't remember how soon after, but it wasn't too long because I wasn't there that long. And just before I got to the International House, I had been a Jesuit seminarian for the last 3.5 years. And I was in the seminary, I was getting a little restless with poverty and chastity and obedience, and I was looking for something different. And maybe this became the first of my many flip-flops. But I decided that I tried the authoritarian way, and it was exciting, it was interesting, it was very clear. And I decided we'd move out. So I moved out. In fact, I told the rector, which they called in those days, the rector of the house where I was staying with my other fellow Jesuits, I said, Father, you know, there's a few of these things that I really don't believe anymore. And he looked at me and said, we got to get you out of here. And within a couple of hours, I was on my way. And within 2 weeks, I was living at the International House. So then I run into Rose Byrne, I run into Arthur Gilbert, and a lot of the other people. I actually, after I got by my first 50 judges, I ran out of people I knew. But it was helpful. And I would tell you would-be aspiring judges, it's important to have gone to school with the appointing power. Or maybe you've had a case with him or with her. Relationships, friendships. It's not all about the stellar record. That's important. But it's also the human touch. And I can't remember why I pointed out the guy. But I liked the guy, and I thought he was smart, and I thought he was to the point. And he certainly seemed honest to me, so I mean, what more do you need in a municipal court judge? And then, of course, he worked his way up. You know, you work your way up from there, and I like the muni court. You can put some questionable people on that, and you don't have to worry too much. Now it becomes the stakes are a little higher when they get on to the Superior Court. So I think that training ground was, I don't know, I know it had a lot of efficiency questions. Anyway, I've only read one opinion by Art Gilbert. It was an opinion that he wrote about a reservoir that reflected light. And somehow, this was in a CEQA case, and he opined that, and he decided, as a matter of fact, that this was a impact on the aesthetic resource. It's a kind of a convoluted argument, if you want to know the truth. But it's embedded in the convolutions of CEQA itself, California Environmental Quality Act. And he said that this reservoir was reflecting light, and that light would affect the aesthetic enjoyment of those people walking along the trails. In fact, it didn't even have to be people on public property. It was just, if I remember the opinion correctly, it was just a kind of a generalized interference with the aesthetic sense. And remember, Santa Barbara and those people are a little more squeamish than us Oaklanders. We could take a few, you know, glares here and there. We're a little sterner, a little grittier in how what we assess as impactful and not. But you know, he wrote it with flair, and it was correct. It's never been overruled. In fact, it's furthered the excesses of CEQA right along, following its training. And I read it because I was trying to, well, that's another story. Anyway, I'm just glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of this. It doesn't feel like the legislative branch at all. This really has a sense of seriousness and consideration, and really that's what we're celebrating tonight. We're celebrating integrity, we're celebrating an aesthetic, we're celebrating a moral sense, we're celebrating a sense of humor and talent, and all the things that we feel our society stands for. So I'm very glad to be here and present this award to my long-standing friend, and I just hope that he doesn't leave the bench prematurely, because there's plenty yet to come in this great decade. You've got to do something in your dotage, and might as well be something useful. I want to give you this award. I get to present it. And I say dotage with affection because I'm entering mine next Monday on my 70th birthday, and I'm hoping for lots of good actions over the next 5 years where we kind of clean this place up a little bit. Anyway, what does it stand for? I think it stands for rectitude or something. What does it say? Beacon?
Beacon of Justice Award.
And he is a beacon.
Thank you.
He's not a prophet, but he is a beacon.
Thank you, Jerry Brown. I think. First of all, let me tell you about the sequel case that you misread. What happened in the case, when you read cases, you have to read them with care, Jerry. I didn't draft CEQA. CEQA says that one of the aspects that have to be included in an environmental impact report are the aesthetic impacts of a development. Now here in this beautiful, pristine wilderness that you want to preserve, they're building this huge, giant water tank. And a number of residents and a number of people were complaining about the eyesore and the glare that would be on this aluminum cover of this mammoth thing, half the size of this library. Now, all an environmental impact report does is inform the public. People think when we write these opinions that we're on one side or the other. We're not. We're only deciding whether or not it informs. And there was nothing in there about the aesthetic impact, which is written in the statute, Jerry. What was I to do? In fact, Peter Cooney worked on the case with me here. I told him, in fact, we met somewhere. And Jerry comes over to me at some affair, and he says, what about this CEQA case that you wrote with so-and-so? And I said, Peter, Jerry Brown doesn't like the CEQA case. And Peter said, tough shit, you know. I mean, what are we going to do? And what we did in that case is remand the case in order to remand the case so that the environmental impact report would discuss the aesthetic impact. That's all. It was a no big deal case. And Jerry, you got much too excited about it. Now, that's true. We first met, and the people have said, how you get to be, you know, a judge, and they say, no, a president or a governor. And when I knew him, you weren't a governor, you had just come out of the novitiate, and he found the right person to escape from chastity and rectitude. And I'm going to leave it at that. We had some great times. And anyway, this wonderful evening, you know, this wonderful evening reminds me of a subject that had been on my mind for some time, which I discussed at my confirmation hearing when I became the presiding justice of my division. And it's a subject that I know you're all interested in. I just want to share with you for a moment, parallel universes. Now, Rabbi Louis Barth is here, and we grew up together. We were called ourselves Faith and Reason. And he was the dean of Hebrew Union College. And we were kids together. And now he has a son, brilliant guy, Aaron, who is a professor of astrophysics. And when he comes over, I always, you know, am plying him with questions about quantum mechanics, much to his irritation. Now, it's widely believed among those in quantum mechanics and cosmology that there are possibly an infinite number of universes, side by side, if you will. This very ceremony in which all of us are here is taking place in a parallel universe. It's all exactly the same, except for one thing. The recipient of the award is Albert Gilbert. And through what I can only call a cosmic glitch, I am the recipient of Albert Gilbert's award. And I just want Al to know that it's not my fault. And if we ever meet, I'll try to make it up to him. Now, I've been an MC at many of these events, and it's kind of a piece of cake in comparison to being the recipient of the award or the honoree. And there's this overriding fear that no one's going to show up. And I had that concern. You're not leaving, are you? What? Keep going? Well, you got to catch him. You did your thing. Okay, someone's got to do it. Thanks very much. Let's hear it for Jerry R. Brown. Thank you. Give him a book. Make sure he gets a book before he leaves. He took somebody else's book, and I had to take it from him. Would somebody give him one? Okay, so I'll sign it later, Jerry. So I had this overriding fear that no one was going to show up. And this is a nice crowd here. I mean, it's not bad. But I'll tell you what really happened. When you're trying a case as a judge and there are insufficient jurors to sit on a case, you send the bailiff out, and they can bring anybody off the street to sit in on the case. That actually happens. And so what I did, I did prevail upon the highway patrol to impress people leaving work and getting into their cars to come to this event. So if you see a disgruntled stranger next to you, you'll know who they are and explain it to them, and it's okay. Now, if we were to trace back in time an inexorable chain of effect and cause, see, we're going backwards in time, we could stop at August 18th, 1975, Monday at around 3:30 p.m. And I had, well, let's go back earlier in the day. That was at 3:30 in the morning. I got up, I was really tired. I'd come off a very difficult case. I had a weekend to relax. I didn't want to go into work that day, and so I actually took a bike ride at the beach. And I had to come back to the office for one reason. We had these lovely offices on San Vicente, and and a lovely garden. And my partner, who's here, we still love each other. Elliot Leonard is here, and Roger. And Elliot is my partner, and we had these feral cats in this beautiful garden. And why do we have feral cats? Because I was feeding them. And it was creating a hassle with the clients and everything. And he says, you've got to catch these cats and get rid of them. My mother had some kittens, and so I had actually caught all the cats. There's a trap, you set, Pet Pride. It's sort of, you set a trap and you take it to Pet Pride, and they don't euthanize them. That's what they told me. They said, we don't euthanize them, we tame them, and we give them out to homes. So there was one cat I had to get, one last cat. And this actually happened. So I'm in the office, and I've put some food in this one cat. It's been very wily and very careful. And Elliot is really annoyed with me. You've got to get rid of the last cat. So I came in to do that. And as the cat, just as the cat goes into the cage, and the cage door is coming down, just at that moment, there's a phone call. And the secretary is beside herself. It's Jerry Brown. I pick up the phone. Now, this is in August. He hasn't made any judicial appointments. I think he appointed Fran Rothschild 2 weeks earlier, and the press was giving him a lot of static for not appointing judges quickly enough. And so he called and said, hi, Art, how you doing? We're talking, blah, blah. And he says, I'm appointing you to the Burbank Municipal Court. And I remember I said, Jerry, I don't live in Burbank. I know it's a nice city. It's a different judicial district. You think maybe Los Angeles? He said, yeah, okay. And that's what happened. There was no litmus test. For the first time, the bench began to reflect the diversity of our community, and most every governor and president thereafter followed suit. And through the 32.5 years I've been on the bench, Governor Jerry Brown's dictum proved true. The psychic benefits are immeasurable. Now, a beacon is a guiding light. I don't know how worthy I am of such an honor. That's why I think Gilbert is really the one who won this in the parallel universe. But within this distinguished group of people, there are so many beacons that the light is blinding. Actually, our Paul Thompson, our Highway Patrol officer who takes care of us, thought I was getting the Bacon of Justice Award. And he said, no, I think you're getting the Bacon of Justice Award because, you are such a ham. So that's what I thought it was. And I didn't realize. You didn't think I'd say that, did you? But to help me, I have a group. I call them the Motel 6 group. They didn't know that. It's a little term, a private little term I have for them. Peter Cooney was the lawyer for Motel 6. But I call them my Motel 6 group because they keep the light on for me all the time when it may go out. It's a wonderful staff. They do their best to make me look good. They're friends and colleagues. We've been together from the very beginning. I have Valerie, where's Valerie Berman? She's been with me from the very beginning. She's a judicial assistant, my best friend, and she will not write a book when she retires soon. We've been together from the beginning, and also there's Lauren Nelson, who brings rare insight into the issues with which we grapple. She belongs to Mensa. That's how smart she's so smart that Mensa made her the chairman of the board in perpetuity. She's dazzling with her brilliance. Peter Cooney, who teaches real property, but has mastered all the other subjects as well. Brilliant writer, and actually he and I worked on the sequel case that Jerry Brown was so disturbed about. Robert Miller, who was once a lawyer for the Oxnard Legal Services, catering, representing the poor and the disadvantaged. And now he can see all sides of an issue, and actually insurance companies have rights too, and he gets it. He's terrific. I love it. And we have Sharon Gronberg, our writs attorney, who with keen analysis helps make the often quick decisions that urgent writ petitions demand. Bonnie Edwards and Rose Whipple, secretaries. They're really more than secretaries. They're assistants who have been invaluable. and the guy that really runs that whole division with such skill, Paul McGill, the clerk of the court, who every day comes up with new ways to make our division work better. I just want to acknowledge all of you and thank you. And there are my colleagues, Ken Yeagan, Paul Coffey, and Steve Perrin. It is not often that your colleagues become your best friends unless you're socially inept. You know, I'm going out tonight with my colleagues. What's the matter? You don't have any friends? And we bring very different insights and perspectives to our work, yet we have a close and warm relationship. Thanks to Steve for emceeing this event. You can just imagine the two of us at oral argument. Thanks to my good friend Elwood Louie. He's a great judge and now a lawyer of uncommon ability. Every governor calls him up when there's a problem. Elwood's handling the case. And Helen Zukin, she's on the Ethics Commission. She's a sterling trial lawyer who has become a dear and cherished friend. And we have a book, and the proceeds do go, all 463 pages. It makes a great doorstop. Thanks to Bill Rudder for publishing it. He would periodically email me with a comment about a column I wrote. And so I said, hey, maybe we ought to publish them. And he had a pained look on his face. And then a few months later, he saw me and he says, let's publish your columns. And Kalman Zempliny, the brilliant director of the Rudder Group, he thinks of everything before anyone else does. And Susan Steinhauser, I mean, incredible. Let me just tell you, when the second flood comes, the ark will be called Susan's Ark. She'll be in charge and the job will get done. Her indefatigable energy and commitment to the library in this event is really stupendous. Her considerable talents and intelligence and passion made this event possible. And of course, everybody always mentions their wife. It's the obligatory thing, my companion, my partner. Hey, she gives me support in abundance, and she is an editor par excellence of my columns. Her unerring sense of what works and what is honest and what should be scuttled has kept my judicial career intact. And I even see so many old friends and dear friends here. I just love it all. Andrea, I just have to mention Andrea Orden, because we know each other all the way back in high school when we were embryos or something. I mean, God, she looks great, doesn't she? All these years we've known each other, and we've been on programs. It's the same thing, right, Andrea? We're doing the same thing again that we were doing so many years ago. I mentioned Paul Coffey, didn't I? Is Paul here? Yes. Paul Coffey and Ken Yeagan, I'm sure I did. And a last comment about the Beacon of Justice, if you will. One of my favorite novels is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. It is a story fragmented and chaotic like life itself. And the lighthouse, hard to get to, is an evanescent light in the wilderness. It doesn't save all ships, and its light cannot reveal everything, but its purpose is invaluable. And in a similar fashion, so functions our courts. Shed light on a problem and resolve it with reason's illumination. To have been involved in this process for the past 3 decades has been a journey of uncertainty, discovery, revelation, resolution, and indescribable joy. And the library, this center of learning and study, is the place that fosters such journeys. This law library, named in honor of my dear colleague and friend, Justice Mildred Lilly, gives access to our justice system and lights the way for everyone. I am honored to be recipient of this award, with apologies to Albert Gilbert. And I want to thank you all for supporting this great institution.